Why This Film, the podcast where we reach back into your childhood, pluck out a movie, give it a little rewatch, and then have a chat about it. I'm Emily Slade, and welcome back. You watched it so many times before, and now you're gonna watch it again. But it's been so many years since you last saw it, and now you show it to your friends, and they're like, what?
What am I watching?
Why this film? And joining me today is Zach from the $2 Late Fee and Podcasting After Dark. Hello!
Hi, happy to be on your show.
Yay, so happy to have you. And your chosen movie is 1984's Cloak and Dagger. The IMDb breakdown. A young boy and his imaginary friend end up on the run while in possession of a top secret spy gadget. It's fairly accurate for IMDb.
It's pretty accurate.
Pretty much what happens. So what's your relationship with this movie?
Well, I saw this movie when it first came out, and I was 8 years old. I was right around the same age as the protagonist in the film, Davey.
Perfect age.
And I was obsessed with this movie. And watching it now recently, kind of figuring out why I was obsessed with it as a kid made total sense to me. I watched it incessantly on VHS. I had a lot of the things he has in the movie. I had the backpack with the ball with my name on it. I had the squirt gun. I had little role-playing figures. In fact, I still have my Jack Flack figure from the board game. Oh. And I have the cartridge from the from the movie. And I have the actual board game itself from Milton Bradley back in the day.
Oh,
or no, Ideal. Yeah, so I was huge obsession on this movie. And then I just realized my dad, during that time, looked like Dabney Coleman, the dad in the movie. And my parents were divorced when I was a little kid, so I saw my dad on the weekends, and he was a firefighter and a military guy. And so in many ways, I was like, wait, I was totally Davey, and I wanted my dad, and he was like, we're not playing with these toys anymore, and put your He-Man toys away. And I'm like, come on, just play with me, Dad. Totally relating to that. And I was on my own a lot, so I would, have my own imaginary world. That's my relationship with this film. It's a very close relationship.
Yeah, that's so deep. This movie is your life, by the looks of it, sounds of it, everything.
Yeah. Thankfully, outside of the parent passing away. So.
Yeah. I'd literally never heard of this movie. I'd never heard of the board game. I'd never heard of the Atari game.
Wow. Okay, cool.
Not at all. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie.
Yay!
I genuinely did. Often when I put these movies on that I've never heard of, and a lot of the times as well, they'll be a boy movie from the 80s or 90s,
yeah.
And I'll be like, okay, here we go.
Yeah.
And even though I can often find enjoyment in most of them, there are going to be times throughout the movie where I'm like, oh my god, time to make a cup of tea. But this movie, I just had so much fun watching it, and
awesome.
I think it helped that within the first 10 minutes I was like, is that Henry Thomas? It's Henry Thomas.
From E.T. fame, yeah.
I love him. And I've only just made the connection that Henry Thomas, who is the kid from E.T., is also the dad in Haunting of Hill House, and he's still acting today, which is so lovely. He's brilliant. He's an excellent actor, and he's so watchable and endearing and charming. And just such a cool premise. And I mean, we'll go through the movie, but it didn't linger too long on anything. It kept you riveted. It had a really cool premise, and I read somewhere that it was known as just a really big commercial for Atari.
Yeah.
But as someone that has no idea what Atari is it like a Mega Drive, like an old-fashioned games console?
Yeah, it's pretty much the first major game console that came out back in the 80s, and the game that came, I think. This game, the Cloak and Dagger, this is just a fake cartridge. It's like a prop. So, it's not like I think the game never came out for the movie. And no, it never was a tie-in. However, E.T. came out for Atari, and it bombed. It's considered one of the worst video games in the history of video games. And
really?
Yeah, and I read that same thing too. You said about kind of being a big commercial for Atari. I had no problem with that as a kid, and I still don't now.
Yeah.
I mean, like, look, if something's going to market towards me, as long as it's cool, I don't care what it is. So.
Exactly. This is the thing. When I read that, I was like, I mean, I guess if you, like, sure, whatever, but like they still managed, as you say, to give us a good ride along this commercial. Whereas you look at something like most of the stuff Michael Bay puts out, which is just pure capitalist marketing to all of these different brands.
Yeah.
I don't want a Beats speaker because I watched Transformers. I'm just like, Michael Bay, you fucking twat, get out of here. But with this, I was like, because it still had that wonderful mixture of like, because that was the whole thing of like, oh no, video games, and like half the movies were being like, hooray, video games, and half the movies were like, you should still read. And this had that kind of great mixture of both, where he was like out the house and playing, but also it was kind of like a video game. It was brilliant. I really, really enjoyed it.
I'm so happy to hear that, because watching it again recently, I felt the same way too. That I love the fact that there's a scene in the movie where he's playing with his action figures in his bedroom, and just kind of going down that world of like make believe, and it is all about make believe. Video games were like the next evolution of make believe, where it was kind of, even though it was all laid out for you, you're still playing the game. You're still a part of the game. And I love in those first maybe 5 or 10 minutes of the movie, it says game start. It flashes that on the screen like, okay, here we go. We're in this world of make believe, and I'm when you break it down. But I just love the idea that he's a typical kid of the 80s. And in a weird way, I think audiences who are not familiar with the 80s and maybe were raised on Stranger Things will watch this and go, whoa, this is like Stranger Things. This is so cool. Like, well, actually, this is pretty accurate for what was happening back then. So,
yeah, 100%. And it has such a great through line of like heart and themes of like family. Like I was crying by the end.
Me too. Me too. I got emotional.
Like, it's so good, and it took me until the end. This is so dumb to realize that we have that wonderful father multi-rolling thing that you get in like Jumanji and Peter Pan all the time, where Jack, the secret agent, is played by the same actor that plays his dad. And I'm an idiot because then there's a scene on the plane where he goes through this whole emotional thing where he like gets rid of Jack and he doesn't want to see Jack anymore after something happens. And I was so confused by it. I was like, why? I don't feel we've earned this. Like, I don't know where this is going. And then, of course, he reunites properly with his dad and has that whole moment in that. Because the movie's like an hour and 40, and these kind of movies tended to be an hour and 30. Yeah. And I know where that extra 10 minutes was, and it was in that sort of father reveal thing near the end. And I'm just an idiot for not understanding the multi-rolling was going on, because then it makes complete sense for them to get rid of Jack to be replaced by his dad. But at the time, I was like, the dad isn't part of this story. What are you talking about?
Well, it's an interesting shift in the movie, because up until that point when he basically lets go of Jack and connects with his dad, it's this psychologically loss of innocence, that once reality has set in, and I don't know how much you want to reveal on the show, but when he has this moment of like, well, that's when you have to grow up, and he's thinking, wait, this is all just make-believe. This isn't real anymore. And there's a line that Dabney Coleman's character, Jack Flack, says, he's like, I always hate leaving when they stop believing. And, it just got me,
my God.
Because it's... As a kid, I remember that shift of when I suddenly wasn't a kid anymore, and I stopped playing with my toys, and I thought, I'm gonna leave all that behind. Now as a dad, and I've got a 5-year-old son, and he is super into make believe, and I'm going back into that world. And I get, and being a voice actor, getting to play all the time when I'm reading my scripts, it's this, I'm getting to reconnect with that part of my youth that I didn't want to have leave, And so when I saw that scene, I was like, oh, it's such a kick to the stomach, because it's like, he's seen too much reality to not, he lost touch with his make believe, the fantasy world.
Yeah. It's so true. It's like real Toy Story vibes of that.
Yeah.
Like, you've got to grow up now. And I'm gonna spoil this movie. So if you want to watch this movie and not have this bit spoiled, stop listening. But I'm gonna go ahead and say it, because I did write extensive notes on this moment.
Awesome.
It begins with, my notes go, Jesus, this is horrid. Do not shoot him. And then in caps lock, yo, what? Because he kills a man.
Yeah.
Henry Thomas kills a man.
Yeah.
At age 9.
Yeah.
And it's not like make-believe. It's not like in some different realm where it didn't happen. They talk about pulling the corpses out of the lake. He's 9 and he killed a man. Like, what? And then it's brilliant stakes, because then we go through this like severe loss of innocence and this severe immediately having to grow up in a way that like Bastian just like, saved a world and rode a luck dragon and then got over his like parent death. This one killed a guy.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah,
it's insane.
Tom Holland, who wrote this movie, he directed Child's Play. He directed Fright Night. Fright Night's one of my favorite horror films of all time, and so his edginess was really apparent in this film. For like it's a kid's film, but it really, for me, it like translates really well for adults as well, because I think they can relate
100%.
to it. And this idea of like, first of all, he sees one of his best buddies dead in a trunk of a car, and he's got to lay down next to him. You're like, whoa, this is not a kid's movie. It's not, because my wife goes, are we going to show this to our son? I'm like, yeah, not yet.
I'd be interested to know what the rating is, because
PG.
Yeah, I think that's why I found it PG. Jesus Christ. I think that's why I found it so enjoyable coming to it as like a 28-year-old, because I was like, oh yeah, like I try and watch these movies from a child's point of view, but I can't help being an adult sometimes, and having this wonderful friend, like he's the first character that we like meet in this film. His like geeky best friend that like lives in the basement of whatever, and he like plays the games with, and then he gets shot in the head and thrown in the trunk, and he's like bundled in with him, and he doesn't even really have a reaction when he sees the corpse.
No.
He's just like, right, gotta get through this, gotta carry on. And I mean, when you step back as an adult and look at that, you're like, this is tragic. Like, this is really tragic. And then it makes it even more poignant when he is, like, we say reunited. They were never really apart, but maybe emotionally reunited with his father at the end, because you're like, you're safe. Like, there is someone to look after you. You don't have to, like, carry this burden by yourself. Like, talk to him and go and see a therapist.
I know.
Please.
Yeah, because there's a big piece of that where, the movie opens up. In the first 15 minutes, you find out that his mom is dead, and his dad is raising him on his own, and he's kind of, and the dad's having an equally hard time with the whole situation, because it sounds like it happened fairly recently. And there's that sweet moment where he asks his dad if he can sleep in his bed with him that night. He's like, can I sleep in your bed tonight? And it's just a warm moment of like, oh yeah, because he's still a kid. He's running around shooting guns, and I have to say, being a child of the 80s, growing up during a very different time than it is now, running around with a gun in my hand, a plastic gun, was like not a big deal. And thinking I was on a secret mission and having to get Twinkies at a store, for my buddy. I didn't get to do that, but I was always envisioning like going on a mission. Whenever I went outside on my own, it was some sort of like, it was a movie, it was a TV show, it was a cartoon. I was living vicariously through the characters I loved. And yeah, his in the 80s there were these great bookstores in the mall. Like I think it's called Game Wizard or Game Genie or something like that. Anyways, that store, I remember going to that. That's a chain, and I would go in there, and they would have every role-playing game you could think of. And the movie opens with a role-playing game, right? And that is so popular right now, with everybody getting back into RPG games and mostly Dungeons and Dragon inspired. But and I had like a spy set, clearly, because I have the Jack Flack figure. But which is so, I'm like, I can't believe I saved this. But I loved spy and espionage type stuff, because it was like, well, this is what kids become. And I think I had this, I teetered on this side of like, well, yeah, dragons are make-believe, that can never really happen, and I'm never going to be in a cave with a 12-sided wizard, and it's not going to happen, but I might get older and be a spy and have to battle, like, you know, real bad guys with guns. And so watching this, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm Davy, and I don't have a friend that's a girl. And that was the other thing too, like his best friend, Kim. Yeah. She's around the same age. And I'm tripping now, thinking that was kind of ahead of its time to have like your best friend is this girl versus, and there was like a little play on romance, just a little bit, like a very age appropriate play on it, you know.
I thought it was brilliant how they did Kim. When she first came on screen, I was like, oh no, who is this? Like, she's annoying. And then within like 2 minutes, she'd won me over.
Yeah,
I was like, you know what? I can see why they picked this child actor, because she's just putting 110% into every sentence. And it's working so well with Henry Thomas's more sort of subtle emotional performance. Because I'm really picky now, but since Stranger Things, where we've had these incredible child actors do such great things on TV, I do get really picky when I look back, and I'm like, ugh, well, you know, Millie Bobby Brown, aren't you? Which is mean, but these kids do a really, really good job, and they have this wonderful moment where you find out that Kim also has, like, a single mom, and she's like,
I love that.
Yeah, I like hanging out with Davey because at least he's not boring like the other boys. And the mum's like, did you get that from me? And it's a very small scene that sums up who they are and what their relationship is. And, you know, she's always trying to, like, use Kim to, like, hook up with Davey's dad. She's like, no, you wouldn't like him. He's, like, a captain of something or other. And she's like, oh, okay. And it's adorable. And it made the character seem a lot more mature. Yeah. And therefore, immediately, again, as an adult, you're like, oh, I'm on board with this kid. She knows what's up. She's, like, on it. And even though every time she hangs out with David, she's like, ew, boys, kind of vibe. You also get to see that that's not how she feels at all. And she does enjoy hanging out with him. And she does enjoy going on all of these stupid, embarrassing sort of things with him.
Yeah, what I love about that
really
is that it's not like she clearly likes him, you know, in that cute way, because she's doing all the things that he likes to do, right? As one does when you like someone, you'll just go along and I'll play video games with you even though I've never played a video game my entire life. I'll play football even though I don't even know how to throw a football. But it's done in such a kind of subtle way where they don't make her seem like a weak character. She's super strong through the whole thing and very confident. I mean, she's on a freaking bus at 11:30 at night going to the airport.
Right?
Like, wait, hold on a second. By herself.
Why are all of these adults in this world so okay with children just and I know the 80s were a different time. We're still in that sort of pre-milk box kid era, maybe, as John Mulaney calls it, but this like 7-year-old girl is on a bus at 11 p.m. at night on the way to the airport, and then all these kids are turning up at this airport like, excuse me, if you send my friend, and she's like, let me just call them over the tannoy for you, and it's like, yo, how about we call like the police and make sure that these parentless children are okay and where they're meant to be.
There's no way in this day and age that could even ever happen. I mean, I remember being a kid back then and going out at night with my brother. I have an older brother, but not doing anything nearly remotely as getting on a bus and going, 10, 15, 20 miles away.
And, it's charming, and it adds to the sort of endearing, childlike nature of this thing, because it does, even though we're to believe that everything in this movie happens for realsies, there is still that element of fantasy where you're like, yeah, but like, as you say, like, no kid would be able to get on a bus at 11 p.m. at night by themselves, like, that just wouldn't happen. But it's more likely to happen in the 80s than it is now, so you really wouldn't get a movie like this made today, because we just live in a much more dangerous and aware world where if anyone saw that, they'd be like, this is a sad movie, right? That child's in danger and we should be worried. And the child was in danger. She had a bomb in her backpack. But, like, it's cool.
Yeah, it's cool because
Henry Thomas is a good deal.
It all worked out. None of the kids died. Just, 3 terrorists, 4, 5, like, spy terrorist people.
Yeah, just the bad guys. I loved, and they got me for a while. I'm really sorry if you're trying to follow this movie. We're jumping around all over the place. I'm just so excited because I really genuinely enjoyed it. So he's got I'll try and break it down. So he's got the, like, Russian codes in this Atari cartridge of Cloak and Dagger, which he accidentally witnessed, like, this scientist's murder, and he got handed it, and now he's got to try and get it to the right people in time and to get it away from the wrong people. We don't know who the wrong people are. But and then we've got the bad people after us, and obviously no one believes him. I'm so happy that eventually every single person, from the authorities to his parents, were like, oh, okay, yeah, this is happening, and we need to stop this from happening. Because if it had just sort of wrapped up secretly, where he defeated the bad guys and the parents and the police never really found out that it was a real thing, and he was just constantly labelled as this boy that cried wolf, I'd have been so annoyed. So I was super happy. And we know that there's, like, a spy that this cartridge is meant to be handed over to, and we don't know who they are. Yeah. And the reveal is so good because we meet the spies very early on in the movie, and then when we met them the second time, I was like, my adult brain was like, aha, I'm with you now, movie, I understand. These are the spy people. Haha, I'm so clever. But they duped me for the first time around. I was like, oh, cute, a little, like, paedophile joke on the barge there for no real reason. All right, I'm with it.
Yeah, it was done really well. I think that the reveal, because initially, they're presented as just side characters, just random people trying to help out Davy. And then when you find out there's a... whatever, like, I won't say this, but unless you want to, I'm totally fine with that. When you do find out that really important trivia about one of the characters, a unique quality about one of the characters, and then when that's revealed, you're like, holy shit, I didn't... Whoa!
It's so cool.
Yeah, and my buddy and I, Dustin, on $2 late fee, we discussed movies from the 80s, but we did an episode for Podcasting After Dark about our favorite traumatic movies of all time, and Dustin said that scene, that reveal, is one of the most traumatic moments for him as a kid. So, wow. Because he's like, yeah, that freaked me the hell out when I was a kid.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's like, just to sidetrack slightly, I remember going to see the Wild Thornberrys movie in the cinemas, and it was very Scooby-Doo, where it was like, oh no, there are poachers, and you've got all of the characters that you're used to knowing, and then you've got, like, Rupert Everett coming in as this side character who's just, like, nothing to do with what's usually in the main story. And obviously my mum sat there like, well, he's the poacher, obviously, and, like... my little brain didn't clock until it was revealed, and then I remember on the car home being like, and then that guy was the poacher, who knew? And my mum was like, obviously he was the poacher, he was always going to be the poacher, wasn't he? And it was in that moment that I was like, I'm going to start paying attention to movies more, like, no one's going to dupe me again. And this movie duped me, and then it was when they had the same camera case in the place. I was like, I see what you're doing, movie. I'm an adult. You can't fool me.
Well, it's done really well. I think you got duped as an adult. I think you show this movie to kids now, I think they would still be like, wait, no, because you would never suspect who ends up being the main spies.
And I think that's what I loved. I loved the casting. I loved the idea behind it. Yeah. I loved how long they pushed it. And I loved how cleverly they played it out. It's so innocent right up until that massive reveal. And you're right, I completely understand why it traumatized him. If I'd have seen that as a kid, I'd have been exactly the same. You know, it's like Treasure Island almost type reveal where you're like, it's so good.
Because I was looking at it, I paused it, and I'm like, are those? Is that a real? Is that a prosthetic hand, or is that a real legit? I think it might have been a legit. They found some person's hand to look that way.
Amazing. Because it does. It looks so good, and I think that's the reason why as well, because it's not something that you tend to see in everyday life, and you especially don't get to see it a lot in the movies.
Yeah.
It is quite a shocking image as well, where you're like, oh, it's different, and it's jarring with me because it's different, and we've been told that it's bad.
Yeah.
Therefore, all of these things are coming in. Without obviously wanting to be cruel and finding disabilities frightening.
Well, yeah, this was the 80s when they didn't give a shit about that stuff, so they're like, oh, whatever. Yeah, I need a person with no legs. There's actually a movie from the late 70s, early 80s, a kung fu movie. I forget what the name of it, but they found every kung fu martial artist has some sort of disability. So there's one who has no legs. There's one that has no arms. There's one that has one arm and one leg, and they're all kung fu fighters. And it's totally exploitation. I think at one point there's a guy with no arms and no legs who's battling people with a stick in his mouth. So it's crazy to me. Yeah, I remember seeing it as a kid going, what the hell is this? And now as an adult, I'm like, that's impressive, But you're right about this movie being innocent up until that one point when he shoots and kills one of the main villains. Who's a great villain, by the way, when he's when he's telling Davey what he's going to do to him. I remember as a kid, I'm like, whoa, this guy's really freaky. And that guy is a great actor, Michael Murphy. But even when he sees his good buddy dead in the trunk, it's not. I think he's desensitized to it because he's still like, it's just a body. Like it's not like he didn't see him get killed. Morris is the character's name, right? And the guy who plays Morris, by the way, like his name's William Forsythe. And if you don't know who he is, if you look up his resume, the dude he is like, that is the complete opposite of how he's ever looked in his entire life.
Right? This is the thing. I was so confused because I was like, you're telling me that this is this person, but you're showing me like he's the idiot out of Jurassic Park, but like he's one of the greatest antagonists in cinema.
Yeah.
And yet he's playing the like almost bumbling sidekick.
Yeah.
Really cool. And he would have made a brilliant villain in this movie.
But he's so really good. He's so good at that. It's such a believable nerdy role, and that was the first time I saw like a quote unquote nerdy role on screen for a kids movie, not outside of like Revenge of the Nerds or whatever. But he is totally like, you go into any comic book store now, you go into any vintage toy store, that character, that guy is who works in those places.
Yes.
Totally like, where's my Twinkies and go get my catalogs and I'm playing my video game. And then the only people he can relate to are little kids because he's got a little kid mentality. But it's so great. And he's working in the back of the Game Master or whatever the hell the store was called. As a kid, it's like, I want to do that. I want to work at a game store. I want to be the guy who plays video games. Is that what he gets to do all day? You never see a customer come in. And then when you're working in the mall, like during the day, hardly anybody ever comes in the store, so.
Yeah,
he's a great character.
No, it's perfect. It's such a good character, and he dies. He like fucking dies.
Gets shot in the head.
And like I didn't believe it because he sort of like sees the reflection in the video game screen.
Yeah.
And he turns around and
great.
he's like, I told you I'd be with you in a minute. And then you just hear the gunshot go off, and Kim like 5 minutes later is looking at the screen that's now got a gunshot through it, and she's like, look, oh my god, what's happened? And it's still at that point I was like, psh, he'll be fine. Like, he'll come around the corner any minute now and be like, oh guys, I'm so glad I made it out. No, they lift the trunk up and his corpse is there with like a bullet wound through the eyeball, and his glasses are shattered, and I was like, oh, this movie's not messing around.
No, and that was the other thing, too, I noticed now as an adult that I didn't notice back then or pay attention to, was that level of violence in this movie. Because a lot of people do get killed, but they're always disposing of the bodies right away. So, like, the scientist that gives the cartridge to Davey falls down a staircase, and the body's gone, right? Yeah. Same with Morris. Morris is gone after they shoot him in the head. And then later on in the movie, when everyone gets killed, oftentimes in like kids movies back in the day, if someone got shot, they wouldn't show the blood. There's blood everywhere. It's not excessive, but it's definitely. And then the scene where Jack Flack, that shift in the moment when Davy says, this isn't fun and games anymore, and Jack Flack says, it's always hard when leaving, when they stop believing. You see him like he got shot up, the Jack Flack fantasy character, and then all the holes on his body start draining blood. I'm like, oh shit, you're pouring blood out of his body. Yeah.
After he just assured Davy, like, oh yeah, they must have missed me. And then the minute Davy's like, I don't think I should hang out with you anymore, figment of my imagination. And he's like, okay, blood everywhere. It happens a couple of times in this movies where there is so much blood, and you're right, like Tarantino-esque amounts of blood as well, like ridiculous.
Yeah, agreed. And it's for a PG movie,
Yeah, which again I love.
Yeah, me too.
I think kids should be challenged and kids should be scared,
Agreed.
and it really does credit to the PG rating of parental guidance. Like, you choose when your child is ready to watch this,
yes.
And I think that sort of 7 to 10 bracket, depending on how squeamish your child is, I think is appropriate for this movie.
Oh yeah, totally. I don't think it's going to be compared to. I was watching a Harry Potter movie with my son the other night, and that level of intensity and violence when he sticks is the second one. So he sticks the sword through the snake's head, and I'm like, damn, I didn't expect that, because I hadn't read that book to him at this point. And I'm watching that, and I'm watching this today. I'm like, this gun violence is different than, monster violence. I get that. But watching it with your kid, totally fine. And I think that's what makes this movie more accessible to adults, because they watch it and they're like, oh, yeah. Because it's not just like a cute kids movie. It's intense. When he throws, he's, like I said, Davy's got his backpack with his gun, with his red squirt blood or whatever, and he's got a softball with his name written on it. And I did the same thing. And in that scene where the ball goes through his window, and it rolls up and you see his name on it, you're like, oh shit. And then the guys try to break the doors open. It freaked me the hell out when I was a kid. Yeah, it was terrifying.
It's terrifying. As an adult, I found it terrifying, because it's that classic, like, the father didn't believe him. He's like, oh, you need to get your head out of the clouds, Davey. You need to stop playing these stupid fucking video games. You need to, like, face reality. I'm going to work now. Bye. And he's like, Dad, the, like, Russians are coming to get me. And he's like, I don't give a shit. Bye. And then,
come on, Davey.
Then, like, it's so well done. They, like, knock on the door, and David's like, nah, I'm not answering that. And then they knock on the door a little bit harder, and he's like, nah, you can fuck off. And then the, like, baseball comes through the window, and you're like, whoa. And then the next thing, it's this entire human person, like, elbowing his way, smashing the glass, breaking the panes, and someone's trying to get in through the door, and the whole house is suddenly surrounded by these, like, 5 spies that are trying to break into this house. And you're like, oh my god, run, small child. Ah!
Well, even...
And
even flashing back to earlier in the movie when the one of the main assassins calls him and he's like, "Is this Davy Osborne?" Good. You're like, "Oh shit! What just? Mommy, Daddy."
It's so horrible. And then he's like, "Dad, it's the spy. He's trying to get us on the phone." And then of course the minute the dad picks up the phone, it's like, "Boo."
Hello.
And
must have been a wrong number. Come on now. Come on. Did you pick up on who did the score for this movie, by the way? The musical score?
So, when it opens, it says music by Brian May. Is that the Brian May?
Yeah.
That's my first note.
Yeah.
The Brian May?
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, Queen's Brian May.
How?
Queen's Brian May.
Like, I love it, and like, good
Me
on
too.
him, and it was perfect.
Yeah.
But, like, how was he commissioned into... They just seem like two completely separate things, like a weird Atari commercial for cinemas in 80s America, and the, like, bassist, guitarist from Queen.
The guitarist
in
from
the
Queen,
UK.
who, like, Brian May, if Queen was the first concert I ever saw as a kid. I saw Queen when I was like 6 or 7 years old. My mom took me there, blew me away. I wanted to be Freddie Mercury when I saw him come on stage. I'm like, I want to be that guy. I want to be a front man who just like doesn't give a shit. He is who he is. He's himself, right? Fully.
I am Freddie Mercury reincarnated.
Yeah.
He died the 24th of November 1991 at 10 a.m. I was born at 11 a.m. on the 24th of November 1991.
Way.
So
that's a trip. I mean, look, I'm talking. My son is fascinated right now with life and death and heaven, hell, because he's into like Greek mythology and stuff like that.
Oh, nice.
And so I said, I'm asking him, what do you think happens when you die? And so he has his own theories, and
that's
then,
so cool.
And so he's like, well, what did you think when you were a kid? And I go, when I was a kid, I used to think that when someone died, someone was immediately born soon after, and they reincarnate, and they well, to use a Doctor Who reference, they regenerated,
Yeah.
And I figured that would be appropriate. And so so that's what I used to think. That is awesome. I mean, I remember when Freddie died, I was like in my opinion, one of the biggest Queen fans that I knew, and it was so tragic when he passed away. But that's huge. Do you sing as well, or you're like, I'm turning it into a podcast empire?
I do sing, weirdly. I think that's partly why, and I've always been into acting, and like I've trained at drama school, so like my whole life I've just been like, yeah, it's legit. I'm Freddie Mercury. What do you want?
Yeah, for real. I mean, come on. If that would be, there's few people in life that I would want to be reincarnated as, but reincarnated from. That's a great one. Yeah. So Brian May, Freddie Mercury. I mean, Brian May. They did the music for Flash Gordon back in the day, but that was Queen.
Oh yeah, of course.
And it was, and I think Brian May mostly had a hand in most of that. But the fact that he did the soundtrack to this movie, and I didn't realize that until I watched it last night and today. I finished it up this morning. That is mind-blowingly awesome.
Yeah. Honestly, I was like, I wrote it down as a thing, and I was like, this cannot be the Brian May. Like, I'm gonna sign on to Skype, and Zach's gonna be like, nah. It's like this huge American composer called Brian May who like used to do all of that. Do you know what I mean? I was like, this is my UK brain being like, well, I know this Brian May, so it must be that one. But it is. That's so cool, and I think it does add. The music in this movie must have contributed. Music usually contributes when I cry. And I cried a lot.
Yeah, there is a unique sweetness to the music in this that like a very hummable, whimsical tone, and when the tension picks up, it's just so well produced. It's well produced, in my opinion.
I completely agree. It really sets the sort of vibe of the thing. Because the whole movie, I was waiting for, like, it to turn around Mona the Vampire style and be like, hey, it was make-believe the whole time.
Yeah.
Like, we're just kids messing about, and, like, none of this actually happened. And the camera's going to, like, turn to the left, and you're going to see, like, a disarray of, like, stuff that slightly resembles what's been going on. But really, it was just in our heads. But no, it actually happens. And I think that's why I enjoyed it so much, because I was like, this is really happening, and that's so cool. And even though I don't like guns, I don't agree with guns, I don't think children should be wielding guns.
Ditto.
I was still like, like 80s, a kid. Like, I was more fantasy than sci-fi or spy when I was a kid, so I was always like swords and sorcery anyway, as opposed to like guns or weapons in that sense. But it's cute because his gun, as you say, shoots this, like, red food dye. Yeah. Which looks horrific. Yeah. When he, like, uses it, it looks like the guy's bleeding from the temple, like, all over his face. But it's not. It's just, like, red paint or whatever. Yeah. But it just adds to that tone. The opening of this movie, which we haven't touched on yet, is brilliant. Because we're straight in with... What we don't realise is the game. I was like, okay, so this character is like, I tried not to read anything about it before I went in, and you're immediately faced with this secret spy, Jack, who's like in Russia, and he's like making his way, trying to get into this like embassy party, and he's trying to stop, and it was interesting because it was very James Bondy in a very obvious, unsubtle way. Like, a guy, like, came out of the car handcuffing himself to a suitcase as he was exiting the car. And at the time I was writing notes like, oh my fucking god, this is a kid's movie. But, like, really fun stuff happens where he, like, a woman shoots a gun at him and it bounces off his armor and shoots her and she dies, and I was like, fucking hell. And then, like, Jack is, like, running towards these gates that are closing down, and he turns around and 2 10-sided dice start rolling towards him.
It's awesome.
And I literally write, D&D dice? What? And then we come out and they're playing the game, and he's like, oh, and I rolled a 10, so Jack survives. And Kim's like, oh, what? How does he get out of that situation? And I was like, oh my god, this is really cool. This is really cool. I'm like immediately on board, because for a while I'd been like, I mean, this is fine, but like, what the fuck is happening?
Yeah.
And then they bring you back into, like, it's just a brilliant setup for the movie. It completely sets up the tone. It sets up the character of Jack, who then obviously becomes an imaginary friend, Davy. I just thought it was really good. Really, really good.
What I love about it is it being 84 as well, and parody was not super popular yet. And it has like an Austin Powers vibe to it at first. You're like, wait, what is this, like going to be a comedy? Because it's super comical. Like you said, that scene where he's got like a bouncing bulletproof jacket, and so she shoots a gun. The girl shoots a gun at him and bounces off, hits her in the throat or whatever. And when the dice come down, you're like, wait, what is going on here? And there's this great shift because they're playing the game, and you think, and I love his little card. He has Davey has like a little set built for the characters, and that game that I have, the board game, looks just like that, minus all those extra things, you know?
Oh,
so cool. And so watching him play that game, I'm like, oh, that's what you do as a kid. You're totally in that world. And no, my hero's always going to survive, you know? And it's funny you say that about like being into more D&D type stuff. I think my dad, like I said, was a Navy SEAL and then a firefighter. And I think I always wanted to connect with him. And so I didn't have, and because I didn't really connect with him at that time, I idealized everything. So my dad was not just a firefighter, but he was the best firefighter. He was not just a Navy SEAL, but he was the best Navy SEAL. Yeah. And so obviously I was going to be more attracted towards stuff that he, that kind of defined him, you know, military and saving people's lives, human people. And so that's why I went into this world of like, oh yeah, that's me. I'm Davey. And here's my cartridge, and I'm gonna go on an adventure. And then eventually it goes away. Fortunately, I didn't have to kill anybody to figure that out. And and like I said, my parent didn't die, thank God. But I didn't get almost blown up in a plane, and then my dad coming up. But it's weird. It's such a trip. I looked back. I'm watching Dabney Coleman, and I'm like, wait. He looks like my dad. Now I'm watching him. So I pull up a picture on Facebook of me and my dad when I was a kid. He looks just like Dabney Coleman.
No.
Yeah. I will show you.
I'm gonna post it. I'll put it on the Instagram page.
Okay, I will show you right now as we're discussing the movie. But yeah, it's a trip, and I'm like, wait a minute, why did I know that as a kid? Like, I didn't even consciously think about that at the time. And now, as an adult, and, hindsight and therapy and all that good stuff, I'm just like, whoa, that's my dad is Dabney Coleman. So if you look at, like, the IMDb picture of Dabney Coleman, and then you take a look at my dad,
Oh, my God.
Like, it's a trip.
Yeah.
It's a trip. Like down to the shirt, that went in the so it's like I was the kid, and then, I'm Davey, and my dad is Dabney Coleman. So there you go.
Insane.
Yeah, that's why I chose this movie. I don't know, because when you ask me what movie do you want to do that you remember fondly, this movie is probably my favorite childhood movie of all time. Right? I have my favorite movies that transcend age. This one, though, is like the one that gets me every time, and it still, in my opinion, still holds up today.
I would agree. It really did. I thoroughly enjoyed it from start to finish. There was not a dull moment. There was not a moment that I was like, oh god, this is a kid's movie. Every single scene lasts just long enough, and then it moves on to the next thing. It's exciting, the characters are interesting, the acting is great, the themes that run throughout are brilliant. I'm like shocked that I'd never even heard of it. Like, I'm shocked that it's a nothing movie. Do you know what I mean? It's not... I mean, do Stranger Things parody it in any way? Do they make reference to it in the same way that they make reference to, like, E.T. and Stand By Me?
I don't think so, because I remember when I first watched, and I love Stranger Things, but when I first watched it, and I'm like, oh, that's from this and that's from that, and breaking it down, I don't think they ever really referenced Cloak and Dagger. Cloak and Dagger like went under the radar, and even on IMDb they give it like a Metascore of like 6.4 or something. And I'm like,
6.
come on. And again, that speaks to me going, what do critics know? You know, like if something resonates with you, that's what matters. I don't care if your favorite movie is Xanadu or if it's Titanic. Like, it doesn't matter. If that's your favorite movie, that's your favorite movie. Doesn't mean it's mine.
Exactly.
And so I'm watching this going, I don't see any flaws. You're spot on with the idea that movies in the 80s were typically 90 minutes, right? And then this went a little bit over. And yeah, you can see that moment of where they might have ended the movie, but but they had to like wrap it up with this idea of like the father and the son getting back together. And I would be curious to know a little backstory on that, you know, from Tom Holland. Actually, we interview a lot of people on $2 late fee. That could be something down the road. Who knows? But yeah, it's, you know, there's nothing wrong with reaching out to somebody. But yeah, this idea like that it hasn't really been touched on by people. A lot of people don't know about it. I think everyone should know about it because it's a fun, it's a twisted kids movie.
It is. It really is. Like, as I say, I cannot, like, push this movie enough.
Awesome.
I really enjoyed it, and there's nothing more I can really say on that. And, like, I watch kids' movies essentially for a living for this podcast.
Yeah,
and
I love that.
Have seen so many that, and I love kids' movies. I do. I think kids' movies are important. I think they're what shape you into who you become as adults. I think they're incredibly necessary and brilliant, and sometimes I watch them and I'm like, the person who made this didn't give a shit. Like,
yeah, I watched The Wizard recently, which is a 90s movie. I think it came out in 91. Fred Savage is in it. And you talked about video games and selling a product to kids. And this was Nintendo. Nintendo was selling Super Mario Brothers 3. They were selling the Power Glove. Power Glove kind of sucked. I mean, the Power Glove was not that great. And they use it in this like, oh my god, it's the greatest thing in the world. And then Super Mario Brothers 3, the big reveal, like what's the mystery game? And the story is weak, and it's bizarre. It's a bizarre movie, and there's a lot of like just subject matter that I don't think is appropriate for little kids, and that's who they marketed it to. And I watched it with my son. It was all pretty much over his head. He just loved the video game parts, and that's all it was. Even where the kids like the dad says to his older kid, Christian Slater actually is in it.
Hey,
he's like the older brother of Fred Savage, and. And he's like, hey, you got to come in here and check out this new video game. It's called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Like, no other video game in Cloak and Dagger is referenced other than Cloak and Dagger, which didn't even come out. And that always pissed me off as a kid because I'm like, I want the game. I want to live the adventure, you know?
Yeah.
But they didn't obviously do that. It isn't. Apparently, this game is based on a game called Agent X, which was an arcade stand-up. And there's a scene in the movie where you see the stand-up game, the side of it, and they're around the 52-minute mark, because I noticed that finally, Davey calls Jack Flack, his imaginary character, he calls him Agent X for the first time. And it probably was a slip that they didn't either pick up on or want to deal with. But I'm like, oh, that's interesting, because apparently he was going to be called Agent X, and they changed it to Jack Flack. Also, this was the first movie where I heard the word pervert, and I'm like, "What's a pervert?" Because the elderly couple, they're like, "That guy's probably a pervert," or something like that.
I wrote like an essay on that moment.
That's hilarious.
It was so bizarre. It's so incredibly well set up. It's very tense. Davy's like on this boat trying to escape from these two
it's a great
spies
scene.
that are after him, and it's very slow because they have to. It's like a tourist boat, and they're going down the river. And he just keeps hopping seats, and then the guy will just stand up and slowly follow him down. And the guy will be like, "Sir, can you sit down, please? Can you sit down?" And he sit down, but like no one's really paying attention.
Yeah.
And Davy's like sitting up, and then he goes and sits next to this old couple, and they're like, "Oh, look at that! Come here!" And they grab him, and it's quite scary as well because they're just like, "What's going on? What's going on?" And he's like, "You won't believe me, but that man's trying to kill me." And they're like, oh, okay, cool.
Cool.
We don't believe you. He looks like a pervert to me. We should call someone.
Yeah.
And I was like, is this meant to be funny?
Yeah.
Is this meant to be like what was the thought behind this whole moment? And I get it later on what's happening, but it's such an interesting thing that they were like, that man's clearly a paedophile. He can't possibly want to kill you. That's silly. But he probably wants to have sex with you. That's fine. We'll deal with that.
Yeah. He doesn't want to kill you. He just wants to play with you in a real dark way.
It's really bizarre.
Yeah.
And I was like, I really didn't know how to feel. It caught me off guard. And it makes up for it later on. But at the time, I was very much like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I remember now as a kid, like looking back, and I asked my older brother is 5 years older than me, and he introduced me to a lot of movies that we talk about on Podcasting After Dark that I probably shouldn't have seen at that age or in the context. And I remember watching Cloak and Dagger with him, and I'm like, "What is a pervert?" And he's like, "You know what a pervert is." I go, "No, I don't." I was like 7 at the time. He's like, "Well, let me tell you what a pervert is." I'm like, "Oh, gross." Just like when we watched Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and I'm like, "What?" I was like 8 or 9. I'm like, "What are we watching? What's happening right now?" He's like, "You'll find out when you get older." I'm like, "Okay."
It's funny, isn't it? Like, I understand why the sort of sex aspect is always in the higher ratings of things.
Yeah, but it is funny because it's like
you can watch violence, but you can't watch vagina.
Yeah, this movie though, like Cloak and Dagger, I just feel, and it's a shame that there's only like a DVD release of it. There's no Blu-ray. You can only rent it on or buy it on iTunes. You can't. It's like not streaming really anywhere. It's worth picking up though. I'm sure you can find it on eBay for $5 or something.
Oh, definitely. I rented it on YouTube, and I think you can buy it on YouTube as well.
Okay.
I'm really glad. I wanted to see like a proper version, not some like scabby, fuzzy version online.
Like watching the VHS version or something.
Yeah.
Which I own still, by the way.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You've got to keep your favorite VHSs. I have like 5 VHSs left that I'm just like, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah, me
like
too.
The original Hunchback of Notre Dame that's like goes fuzzy at one point.
There's something nostalgic about it. I work with this kid. I tutor kids as well, and there's this 10-year-old who's obsessed with the 80s. Probably because of me. And he's like, I want everything about the 80s. I want a Nintendo. I'm like, you want the Nintendo with like the 30 games on it all built in? He's like, no. I want the original Nintendo that you have to plug in, like the one where you had to blow the cartridge and you had to go up and down to make sure it worked. God. He's like, I want the TV. I'm like, do you want like a little mini flat screen? He's like, no, I want the TV VCR combo. I'm like, okay, if you're going to go down this rabbit hole, these are the movies you need. And understand, it's not a DVD. You can't just push a button and go back. It's like you got to watch the whole thing through. Anyways.
Yeah, no, like I get it. Nostalgia is what I thrive on, but there are some things that I'm like, man, I'm really glad that I can be on the internet and also be on my phone at the same time.
Yeah.
Like we were given an hour of internet a day as children. And 45 minutes of that would be waiting for the Dolls Mania page to load. And then you would have 15 minutes of game time dragging tops onto, like, naked dolls. And then that would be your time up, and you'd be like, excellent, time well spent.
That was the best. Start that modem up.
And then it's like, get off the internet, I need to call grandma. all of that. Good times, except not good times at all, because now if something is like 30 seconds delaying, I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah, isn't it funny? There's a show on Netflix or on Hulu called Pen 13, and Pen 13 is hilarious. It's about kids growing up in the 90s, and
nice.
There is that scene where the mom needs to get on the phone and she's trying to start up the internet or whatever. Yeah, we get pissed off when we see the little rainbow spiral on our computer for more than 5 seconds. We're like, come on! You're not supposed to do this! What do I pay you for?
Yeah, literally. It's insane how much changes. But if you genuinely haven't seen Cloak and Dagger, I honestly, and I know I say this for like every movie because I love kids' movies, but like this one, like I really can't push enough to you how much I genuinely enjoyed this movie.
That's awesome.
Like,
I'm happy to hear that.
Really did, and I think you're right in that it has those adult underlying things with like ridiculous amounts of violence and genuine death, and the stakes are like so high. I think at one point I was even like, they're gonna fucking kill the kid, like they don't give a shit, we're gonna Game of Thrones all over this place, like they don't care, we're all gonna learn a valuable lesson. But they don't. Spoilers. Thank God, because then we get the gorgeous ending. I wrote like because you've got the spies are on the plane, and his dad has come in to pilot the plane to try and get them away with the cartridge in order to save Davy, and he pushes Davy out the window, and Davy runs following this plane, but the bomb's already been set off, and the plane explodes in the distance. And I literally wrote a note where I was like, I know that the dad is going to be okay, but I am weeping. And then the dad, and that was the moment. It's so stupid. The dad walks through the smoke in this beautiful sort of 80s way, with the like exploding plane behind him, just like, whatever, it's just a day of work for me.
Because he's an Air Force pilot. He was in the Air Force, so he's used to combat.
So he's genuinely a hero. And Davy's there going, Jack?
Yeah.
Jack, is that you? And that's the moment when I was like, oh, the actor plays the sick.
Oh, wow.
It took me until that moment that I was like, oh, like, I don't know if that's a testament to this man's acting. I don't know if it's a testament to my idiocy and lack of paying attention. I was so obsessed with trying to figure out who the spy was to prove that I was an adult now. I don't know. I completely missed.
There's enough subtlety in his performance, and Dabney Coleman, of all people, the guy. You know, a lot of people know him from like 9 to 5 as being this asshole boss and more kind of chauvinistic roles. And this movie for me was like, whoa, he's cool. Where they took a guy who looks like just a normal guy with a mustache and receding hairline and turned him into a secret agent. Yeah. And there's enough subtlety in his performances of both characters where 100%. I could totally see you going, wait, maybe that's not the same guy. You know, and they do really well. This was before they could do like split screens and all sorts of trick photography, and they handle it really well when the dad is talking to Davy and Jack Flack is like, he's not listening to you, he doesn't care about you, whatever, you know. And down to Dabney Coleman, because it takes place in San Antonio, Texas, so the dad kind of has a Texas accent, and Jack Flack does not. He's got the American, you know, standard English accent.
All American.
Yeah. And it's done so well. That's great. Whether it was naivete or who cares. I love that.
I think it did add to my enjoyment of the movie, because at that moment I was even more overwhelmed, because I was like, oh, it was the same person the whole time.
That's awesome.
And then, of course, like, he runs into his arms and he's like, Dad! And I mean, ever since I watched The Railway Children, where she runs into his arms being like, it's my daddy, I've, like, any scene that's even remotely similar to that, I will lose it.
I will say now being a dad and just loving being a dad of a young boy and watching these, I weep now. I'm just like, this is how I feel. I hope my son feels this way about me.
I can totally imagine, because, like, I think what's wonderful about this movie is you can put yourself in the place of Davy when you're a kid, and then you put yourself in the place of the dad or even Jack when you're older, and it works regardless of your age, because you understand. I really love children's movies that take the time to make sure that the adults reasonings and understandings and feelings are made clear within the course of the movie.
Yeah.
So you're not just like, adults suck, teachers are lame.
Yeah.
And you actually take the time to be like, hey, adults are people too. So then when you are an adult and you do revisit it, you can be like, I feel you, man.
Yeah,
So
because the
nice.
dad's just trying his best. He's a widow, and now he's a single dad, and he's trying to raise his son, and he's an airline pilot, so he's
busy
trying
all the time.
Yeah, and you're like, oh man, there are a lot of, this is an onion, there's a lot of layers to this bad boy, because it's more than just. And the kid is, he's probably on his own a lot, so he's using his imaginary world, and he's hanging out with Kim, probably hanging out with Kim's mom all the time too, because which, and I love the way they, like you said earlier in the cast about how the way the mom is like, oh, asking about the dad. It's done in a really subtle way. It's not done in this like, oh, I'm single, ready to mingle. It's more just like, well, I just curious. It was more like curiosity. I didn't get this like, oh, let's hook up kind of thing, which would be totally done now. Everything is like, oh my gosh, you're single, I'm single, let's do this. Come on.
Oh my god, that's so true. It would have been like pushed in our faces, and half the movie would have been taken up with their relationship. It would have sucked. Because they go too far then, where it's like, adults are people too, and therefore we deserve our own storylines and own relationships. And it's like, no. This is about the relationship between you and your 9-year-old half-orphaned boy.
Yeah.
And you love him, and we love him, and everybody's crying.
End scene. From top to bottom, as my good buddy Corey would say, T to B. It is it's a flawless film in my opinion. I love it. I hope people go out and check it out. I hope it gets a new little life. It deserves a new life. It doesn't need to be remade. Don't go off and do the whole remake thing.
No, do not remake it. It would not work in a post 9/11 world.
Yeah. And I've read enough things that people criticize it, and there's always something to be criticized about every movie. But no, this movie's just fun. It's fun in like a dark way. It's a dark, fun movie. And I'm so happy to be able to talk about it because I love it so much. And thank you so much for letting me be on your podcast.
Oh my god, thank you. Like, I literally cannot stress enough how great this movie was. Like, I've watched like 5 movies this week in preparation for my podcast. And spoiler alert, apologies to literally everyone else. This was my favorite movie. This hands down was like, I was like, this is great. This is a great movie. Like, I can appreciate parts of other movies, and I can understand parts of other movies, and I can like, all of that. But this one, I was just like, I had a good time. I do not regret the hour and 40 minutes that I spent watching this movie.
Well, if you ever need another good movie to watch, and let me know, because I'm happy to be back.
Yes. Please do, because I trust you now. I trust your opinions. You can't let me down.
Cool, I won't. I promise.
Thank you so much for coming on. Do you want to tell us about, Corey spoke a little bit about podcasting after dark, but you can elaborate on that, and obviously tell us all about $2 late fee as well.
Yeah, sure, thanks. Podcasting after dark is a really fun breakdown of movies we were not allowed to watch as kids, and mostly focuses on horror and sci-fi, exploitation, stuff like that. But then my other podcast, $2 late fee, is very near and dear to my heart as well, because it's a trip down memory lane, where my co-host and I, we take a movie that we loved as kids and see if it still holds up today, and we take a song from that movie that stood out to us. So it's not just the movie, but it's also a song as well, and the meaning behind that. And then we talk about what happened that year the movie came out. So, for example, we talked about there's a 80s movie called Quicksilver with Kevin Bacon where he's a bike messenger. And Roger Daltrey does the theme song to it. And it's like this hard-hitting, put your headphones on and go to the gym workout song. And we talk about what was happening in 1986 when that movie came out. And it's really fun. And spliced in with that, we do a lot of celebrity interviews. So we interviewed Turtle from North Shore. We interviewed Diane Franklin from Better Off Dead. We have an upcoming interview with Robert Romanus, who played Damone in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. We've got actually some you would expect, some you wouldn't. We've got some big names coming up. I don't want to reveal just yet because I haven't officially booked them, but it's potential. Really great names. And so, yeah, it's a lot of fun. $2 late fee. $2latefee.com. $2 late fees on Instagram as well.
Check them out. Definitely check them out. These guys are great. You're all of the sort of Blast from the Past network.
Yes.
On you, which is a brilliant network. Check out every single podcast available within that network. They're all really fun, all really cool, all up your street. If you like this podcast, you'll love what they're doing over there. It's a lot of fun.
But thank you for letting me be on your show. It's really been so much fun, and I hope to come back and wow you with another fantastic 80s flick.
Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time on Why This Film. Bye!
Bye!
We watched the film and we talked about it, but now it's time to say goodbye. We'll be back again with another movie that makes you wanna ask, why?